I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents. Looking for a place to call home.
I felt really happy that I have a home, that they love me.
A Brooklyn anniversary you may not know about.
Because you had a city in Brooklyn, therefore it made sense eventually to establish a diocese in Brooklyn.
And if it happened in the Brooklyn Diocese, he probably knows it.
My goal has really been to inspire people with the great stories that we have.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. The foster care system. It is one of the most troubling questions. What to do about older children who need a home, but oftentimes they're some of the toughest ones to place.
That's right, and a couple of organizations are actually teaming up, and they've come up with a unique way to bring attention to that very situation. You can see it right now at a mall in Brooklyn, and you might say it's something that gets right in your face. There are about 17,000 children in the foster care system in New York City, all looking for homes. Enter Heart Gallery NYC and Little Flower Children and Family Services of New York. The two organizations have teamed up to feature just some of those kids in need of forever homes. Professional New York photographers took these pictures of them, and now they're up for display at Kings Plaza Mall in Marine Park.
One of my goals is really to create permanent families for children. I want these families to exist throughout the child's life, into adulthood, into, when they get married. So I'm really looking to recruit forever families.
Children of all ages are up for adoption, from infants to teenagers, and the teenagers sometimes get overlooked.
The age range is what got me, because you have, older teenagers and then you have the younger kids as well. So it really, a lot of times people might not even think of older teenagers when they're looking to adopt children.
Exactly. I get so many requests for a baby, and people don't realize that there are children 5, 6, 10, 15 who need a family.
With that in mind, we wanted to find a group that helps connect prospective parents with older teens who are up for adoption. Our search led us to You Gotta Believe, headquartered on Coney Island. Now, first of all, tell me a little bit about your organization, You Gotta Believe, and what you do.
You Gotta Believe, I think we consider ourselves first and foremost a homelessness prevention program. Half the homeless population are made up of young people who are discharged from foster care, and we feel if we can get them families before they're discharged from foster care, we can go a long way in preventing more homeless people from being out there on the streets.
I wasn't looking to adopt a baby because I worked full-time, and it was pretty, strict 9 to 6 with no time off, and so I was looking for something that would fit into, just kind of fit into my rhythm.
Denise contacted the city, who then referred her to You Gotta Believe. That was 5 years ago, and it was then she found Christina, a 14-year-old in foster care. Christina had been through a lot in her life, moving from foster family to foster family.
I never felt so much love. I never felt so much love than since I worked before. I felt really happy that I have a home, that they love me and stuff, and they love Savannah.
Christina, who is now 19, has a child of her own named Savannah.
I'm so happy to have them both in my life. It's really about breaking cycles and making sure patterns don't repeat themselves. I'm absolutely dedicated to making sure that Savannah never has to experience what my daughter had to experience.
As for Pat O'Brien, who heads up You Gotta Believe,
You ever hear that expression, you never work a day in your life if you enjoy what you do?
Yeah.
So I get an opportunity to enjoy what I do every day that I go to work. And the fact that I was able to found the organization and I'm now the executive of it, it just makes life just so wonderful that I can do something I truly believe in and get a full-time salary out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. As for Denise, she now works for You Gotta Believe and trains prospective parents on ways to deal with teens after the adoption becomes final.
I really encourage my parents that no matter what their faith is, that now is the time. You have to really rely on your faith. Whatever your particular denomination, whatever, work it. Times get difficult, times get tough, and that's when I really have to rely on and strengthen my foundation and go back every day and remind myself, why am I doing this? What am I doing? And you know, that's what I encourage my parents to do.
And right now, the Heart Gallery is bringing attention to the needs of other children and teens desperately in need of forever families.
Every day is a challenge, just dealing with a person's idea of what they want from a child, and to deal with the child's needs and what they're looking for. And it's a challenge just to make a match. But when you finally do find the right family for that child, it takes away, you know, all the challenges were very much worth it.
Well, for more information on the Heart Gallery and the other organizations that we covered in the story, you can head on over to our blog. Go to netny.net/currents and click on Riding the Wave. Definitely some very inspiring stories there, and you might not think, you know, if you're ready to adopt a child, a lot of people just think babies. They might not think older teens and kids.
It puts a very human face on the individuals, on the people that are children, that are in need of a home, and I think it really allows somebody to connect and say, wow, that's somebody that I want to be able to be with. And then from there, perhaps, the adoption process has started. Right,
and one more thing that was very inspiring, actually, is one of the pictures actually has at the bottom a new little attachment on it that says, "I've found a forever home," on one of the kids' pictures there. So it was just a very, very touching thing to see. A lot of places around the country actually do something similar to this. When I was last in Florida, they had something like this as well. It's nice to see that it's here, and good luck, obviously, to the organization and to all the children. It's great. Well, stay tuned. There's much more current straight ahead, including all the day's headlines. And when in Rome, do as the popes. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up a little later, a happy anniversary for Brooklyn. Very happy, but first let's take a look at the day's headlines. Sonia Sotomayor is one step closer to the Supreme Court. A subcommittee voted today to send Sotomayor's nomination to the full Senate. The full Senate is expected to approve the nomination next week. Sotomayor, a Catholic, would become the first Hispanic woman on the Supreme Court. Well, we told you yesterday about Pope Benedict's plan to visit the Shroud of Turin when it goes on public display next spring. Well, now there's also news about the authenticity of the shroud, which many believe to be Christ's burial cloth. A Vatican researcher says her studies indicate letters on the shroud were written more than 1,800 years ago.
Well, meantime, Pope Benedict will have another place to call home. The region of Intrad in northern Italy, near where the Pope is vacationing, will make him an honorary citizen later this year. In Vatican City, tourists are getting a chance to walk like the popes, as we hear from Rome Reports.
This is one of the most famous landmarks in the Vatican neighborhood. It's hard to miss, stretching about a kilometer from the foot of the Vatican's Apostolic Palace to Castel Sant'Angelo on the Tiber River. Its old-age splendor makes for great pictures, but few people that come here know the real history behind the Passetto di Borgo.
It was an escape route that connected the Vatican with Castel Sant'Angelo, which was a safe haven. Several popes used the Passetto for this reason.
Centuries later, Francesca di Ottavio gives tours of the passageway that has become one of the largest tourist attractions in Rome. But it's only open for a couple of short months during the summer. For those that choose to walk in the footsteps of fleeing popes, the experience is twofold. Because not only are they walking on a piece of history, but they're doing so from up above.
When you find yourself between the angel on the terrace and the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, you find yourself in between two different things, and you don't know whether to look ahead or behind.
Popes like Clement VII crossed the Passetto when his life was in danger during a sacking of Rome. An urban Roman myth was born as a result of the Passetto's reputation as a path to safety, that says if a man walks 70 times along the Passetto, all his problems will disappear. Francesca says the most rewarding part of the walk is reaching Castel Sant'Angelo, just like the popes did. Only today, people enjoy a much more different kind of freedom than they did.
sicuramente la terrazza dell'Angelo, perché
The Terrace of the Angel, I think, is the nicest part. It's one of the highest terraces in Rome, and you get a 360-degree view of Rome, a beautiful sight.
Romans and foreigners alike will continue to enjoy the Passetto until summer's end. Then they'll have to wait until next year to walk in the footsteps of fleeing popes.
Well, plenty of people are walking that path. More than 17,000 people visit Vatican City each day.
What a nice history there.
I know, it's amazing.
I like it. Well, stay tuned. There's much more current straight ahead.
Coming up, from the Vatican to Brooklyn, looking back at 156 years of history.
Pope Paul VI made the first visit of a reigning pontiff to the United States. My whole high school, we had to go out there, Cathedral Prep, and line up on Queens Boulevard and watch him as he whizzed by.
Welcome back. History tomorrow. 156 years ago, the Brooklyn Diocese was formed. And we want to have a look back at what has been a storied and illustrious century and a half. To do that, we are joined by a priest of the diocese who also just happens to be a history buff, Monsignor Sean Ogle, the pastor of Our Lady of Mount Carmel Parish in Astoria. And Monsignor Ogle, thank you so much for being here and joining us on Currents.
Nice to be with you.
Tell us a little bit, if you will. 156 years is a long time. Brooklyn was not always independent.
No.
Tell us a little bit about how that shift was made and how that came about.
Okay. Well, you know, I am a buff. I'm an amateur at this. I don't have a degree and I'm not an expert, but I love this stuff and it's of great interest. Of course, when the Church in the United States was established, it was all part of it was just the Archdiocese of Baltimore, the Diocese of Baltimore, and then in 1789. And then as the numbers of Catholics slowly began to grow, they created additional dioceses, 3 other additional dioceses. And one of those was the Diocese of New York, which at the time would have encompassed all of New York, all of New Jersey, and more. But of course, the Church always tries to create new local churches, new dioceses, when the population begins to warrant it. So sometime, I think, in the 1820s, Brooklyn became a city, distinct from New York City. So because you had a city in Brooklyn, therefore it made sense eventually to establish a diocese in Brooklyn, which is what they did in 1853, probably about 20 years after the city of Brooklyn had been formed.
So then what area then made up the Brooklyn Diocese exactly?
Right. Well, it included all of Long Island, which would have been Brooklyn County, Queens County, which extended all the way out to Nassau. There was no Nassau. Wow. All the way out to Suffolk, rather. There was no Nassau County. And then Suffolk County. So Brooklyn Diocese was the entirety of Long Island, and it remained that way till 1957.
That's amazing. So that's even relatively recent. And a lot of the demographics, if you will, have changed as well, right? It used to be a little bit more Irish and...
Yeah. Well, I guess after, the Church in the United States reflected a very small Catholic population during the English colonial period because Catholics were just not really tolerated outside of Maryland. But you began to get, in New England, you had French Catholics. In the Middle Coasts, you had Catholics coming in small numbers from Ireland. But it was really after 1820 and, I guess after 1800, you began to have a slow but steady growth of particularly the Irish and other Eastern European Catholic populations who were experiencing turmoil, the Napoleonic Wars and so forth. And then by the time you get to the 1830s and the growth of American industrialism and so forth, you began to have more job opportunities here, and you began to get a growth in immigration.
Sure.
But it was really after 1848 with the famine in Ireland and the revolutions in Germany and other parts of Europe, you really had massive Irish, German, and other immigration to the United States, which really made the church grow.
And grow a lot.
Later in the century, then, the Italian immigration after the Civil War, and Eastern European immigration became huge.
Which is partly what you see in Astoria now, as you were saying, yeah. And also, there have been a few famous faces that have come out of the area, correct?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, in my particular parish, I guess, in my particular neighborhood, Tony Bennett comes from Astoria, and he was Di Benedetto, I believe.
Right.
He really came from Immaculate Conception parish.
But even some cardinals. And
oh, well, yeah. Well, Cardinal Bevilacqua, the recently retired cardinal in Philadelphia, is a Brooklyn alumnus. And Cardinal Carberry, who was the cardinal of St. Louis, Missouri, back in the 60s and 70s, was a Brooklyn priest. Bishop Swanstrom, who was the head of Catholic Relief Services in the United States, I believe, for many years.
All have ties.
Yeah.
And it's no stranger either to papal visits, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the impressions.
Well, when I was in high school, Pope Paul VI made the first visit of a reigning pontiff to the United States, but he was really visiting the United Nations. That was 1967, I think. Okay. And I know we had, my whole high school, we had to go out there, Cathedral Prep, and line up on Queens Boulevard and watch him as he whizzed by on his, in his motorcade.
Yeah.
And then he had Mass at Yankee Stadium, which we got to go to. And he made his official visit to Brooklyn Diocese was to the World's Fair, to the Vatican Pavilion, where the statue of the Pietà was on loan to us during the World's Fair. So he came and made a stop there. And then subsequently Pope John Paul, with his, I guess, 3 visits to the United States. Yeah. And he did pay a homage at St. James Cathedral on the first visit. He stopped outside, and they have a plaque erected to that event.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of good ties there.
Yeah, sure. And then, of course, Pope Benedict, more recently.
Right, absolutely.
And they all have to come through the Brooklyn Diocese because we have both of the airports in New York.
That's a good way of looking at it. Monsignor, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, all that great perspective and all that great history. Monsignor Ogle of Our Lady of Mount Carmel Parish in Astoria. Stay tuned, there's much more Currents straight ahead. We just took a look back at 156 years of history in the Brooklyn Diocese. You're now about to meet a man who makes a living looking back at that history every single day.
That's right, and his name is Dr. Patrick McNamara. He's the assistant archivist of the diocese and the creator of McNamara's blog, which focuses on church history. What else, right? He's been a great resource for us here at the Net, and tonight, as the diocese prepares to mark another anniversary, he is our eyewitness.
I'm looking here at an issue of the October 2nd, 1909 tablet, the diocesan newspaper. Shows a picture of a Father William McGurl, who was our first New York City police chaplain. He was also famous for a speech he gave at the Waldorf Astoria, where he called for immigration restriction, that is, restriction to only people from Ireland should be allowed to enter the United States. I'm Dr. Patrick McNamara of the Diocese of Brooklyn Archives. I've been with the archives for about 9 years. During the day, as an archivist, you do a lot of different things. Sometimes you're looking up photos, you're helping people research family members who came over to Brooklyn in the 1850s. Sometimes you're helping people find their student records. Sometimes you're helping people in the building and maybe an office find their old files. It's never the same thing 2 days in a row. McNamara's blog was set up in January of 2009, and the purpose of it is to feature something that happened somewhere in the history of the Catholic Church, whether it's locally, nationally, or internationally. And really, the whole idea has been to make people aware of what a rich heritage we have as Catholics. And unfortunately, Catholics are very much like the rest of the population in that we don't know our own history. I think sometimes it's easier to reach people within the context of a blog than it would be within a classroom or you know, writing a book. And I think my goal has really been to inspire people with the great stories that we have as a church, and that's been my goal all along. I think the way my faith impacts my work is that I see the church, you know, I see my faith as something lived out, and lived out in union with the people who have gone before me, people over the centuries, that I have this connection to people who, you know, were living out their faith 100 years ago in Brooklyn, or 500 years ago in Italy or France, or 1,000 years ago in Germany or some other country. That it's a sense of belonging to something larger than myself, I think, that informs the way I approach my work. The sense of being a part of what St. Paul called the mystical body of Christ, being part of a larger entity than yourself. I think that's what makes gives my work such meaning.
Patrick McNamara, tonight's eyewitness. And for more information about the Brooklyn Diocese, you can head on over to the Diocese website. It's dioceseofbrooklyn.org. And just a fascinating history, I'm sure, behind the diocese.
He's such a good guy. He knows so much.
Yeah.
And, you know, he tries. I mean, you think about all the things that are lost over the years. People throw away collections of, you know, in their attics, albums or things like that, or old letters, or, you know, it's his job to, you know, collect all that stuff and collate it for the diocese and make sure that people can revisit their histories. And it does obviously tell a story over time. Yeah, and it's amazing too. You know, it's like, I don't often go to work. I don't ever go to work and open up a file that has, you know, 200-year-old documents in it and things like that. It's just, I don't know. It's just really cool. It's a very interesting line of work, and it's so cool that, you know, you get paid. If you're a history buff, you get paid to do something like that. I think it's a very cool thing. Right. Yeah. Well, and he was also, it wasn't just about getting paid, or isn't, I should say. It's more also about him connecting to his faith through his work. Right. Exactly. And there's definitely a deep and rich history and way of doing that. Well, that is all for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, turning lemons into lemonade to help the people of Haiti. That and more on Wednesday's Currents. Remember, you can always watch us online. netny.net/currents is the website. You can see clips of the show there. Check out our blog, too. It's called Riding the Wave. And you can also follow us on Twitter. The address there is twitter.com/currentsny. So thanks so much for watching us tonight. And for all of us here at Currents, I'm Francesca Maxime. And I'm Matt McClure. Have a great night.